Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Newark and Sherwood series, a district of 84 civil parishes right in the centre of Nottinghamshire. Come with me as we delve into one of them. Welcome back to Newark and Sherwood, everybody. Now, do you remember in the Clipston episode where we began right on a parish boundary which split Clipston into two pieces, part on the Newark side and part on the Mansfield side? Well, it's exactly the same here in this place. I'm standing right on the parish boundary between Newark and Mansfield once again. And this time we're in a place which a lot of people would think is called Rainworth. However, that is not how you pronounce it. It's called Renneth. This Newark and Sherwood video is sponsored by Past Days, a family history blog by June Terrington. You'll find a link in the description. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to one of those places whose name is continually mispronounced by many. This is Renneth, and I guess we have to start by explaining why it's not Rainworth. In the year 617 AD, a mighty Roman warrior named Readwald stayed here prior to a battle with Ethelfrith, king of Mercia. In the battle, Readwald's son, Regehere, was killed, and from that day the area was known as Regehere's Wath. Wath, of course, the name given to a ford or a crossing point over a river, as we've learned in other episodes. Over the years, the spelling of the name has changed, eventually morphing into Reynwath by 1268. From there, it's commuted again to the present-day spelling. Theoretically, to call it Rainworth is not incorrect, given this bit of history, but local dialect has once again changed it into Renneth. So now we've cleared that up, what's here? Well, Renneth is perhaps best known for being a mining village. This was the site of the enormous Rufford Colliery, which would vastly increase the size of the village from originally a quaint hamlet with just 13 houses in the 16th century to a thriving metropolis by the 1960s. Rufford would stop producing coal in 1993, and since then Renneth has shown signs of industrial decline. That said, it's bouncing back now and it's becoming a desirable place to live once again. Let's go and check out why. Our route begins right on the parish boundary. Part of Renneth is in Mansfield and part is in Newark and Sherwood. This shop and post office is on the Newark side. So too are most of the amenities in Renneth. It can offer everything you'd expect from a former mining village, including plenty of shops and food places. The absolute centre of the village is defined by this junction on the B6020, Renneth's former main road. It's where Southall Road East meets Kirklington Road. Towering over the village's central junction is a Tesco store. This used to be a pub called the Robin Hood Inn. Renneth still has other pubs, and they're all on the Newark side of the border. Operated like a pub is the Venue, which used to be a cinema. It then became a snooker club called Potter's. At one time there was a tree in the village centre known as the Tree of Knowledge. Planted in 1879, it was a popular meeting place for people. It was cut down due to disease in 1962. So that's the main village centre, but there's going to be more to see in a little while, a bit further around the route. Now we've reached the entrance to Renneth Miners Welfare Football Club. We're going to go and check this out next. Just before we have a look at the football club, we've got the Renneth Youth and Community Centre, which is run by an independent charity called the Social Action Hub. Over the road is the village hall. This was originally a drill hall and was built in the 1920s, around the same time as the former picture house was. It was also in the 1920s, 1922 to be exact, that Renneth Miners Welfare Football Club were founded. Last year, they celebrated their centenary. They're sometimes known as Rufford Colliery FC and are nicknamed the Wrens. This is the welfare ground where the club has played their home games since their inception. They've spent the greater part of their existence in the Notts Alliance, a league they've won 10 times, but they're currently members of the United Counties League Division 1, the 10th tier of English football. Over the road is the Miners Welfare Club, which has affiliations with both the football team and the local bowls club. So without doubt, Renneth is another typical mining area. Football club, Miners Welfare Club, and pit housing. We always see pit housing, don't we? That's what I like to call it. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to head up Kirklington Road and we're going to see a lot more of that pit housing here. We're heading into some residential areas. All of this will look very familiar if you've watched other videos of mine that cover former mining areas. I chose to take a quick look up Garden Avenue, which is where we can see Renneth's rather extensive allotments. I'm pretty sure all the fans out there will approve of my decision to do so. Rufford Colliery has a lot to do with how Renneth looks today. It provided housing for approximately 400 families within a triangle-shaped plot between Kirklington Road, South Avenue and Python Hill Road, as well as plenty of leisure facilities too. As well as the football club, Renneth once had a Lido, but it was disused by the end of World War II. Even though Renneth already had a school, Heathlands, the increased size of the village meant a second school would soon be added to the mix, and it's still going today. This is Python Hill Academy. Made of brick and built in a classical style, it's laid out on a quadrangle plan with pitched roofs and slate tiles. Once you get beyond the school, the 1920s buildings start to diminish and things start to get a bit more modern. Here's Hillview Surgery, next to a row of shops. So the whole time in that last section I've been gently walking uphill. It's not a steep hill and I haven't really felt it, to be honest. We've now reached the summit where there are two more landmarks. You've got a petrol station here, which is also a Spar and a Costa. There we go, and directly opposite that, behind these trees, there's a pub called the Sherwood, and I'm going to be turning down the side of that in a moment. After walking through the Sherwood, we're now on another housing estate, and this one's a little different. It was built sometime after 1965, and although it was for miners, its residents all had one thing in common: they came from elsewhere. Many families moved from mines in northeast England, and as such, this estate became known as the Geordie Estate. I wonder if that increased the Sherwood pub's sales of Newcastle Brown Ale. Idle musing, nothing more. Once through the estate, we're back on Kirklington Road again, which comes to an abrupt end. We can go a bit further though. A path at the end of the road will take us to the A617. This is now the main route through Renneth, bypassing the village to the north. The eastern end of this bypass crosses a former railway line. After somehow working out how to get down to this, trust me, it wasn't easy, we're now on the old line, which now forms part of the National Cycle Route number 6. Okay, so this next part of the route is pretty simple. It's just a walk down this old railway line to the southern part of Renneth, where we start to turn and head back up to where we began. So without further ado, let's go. Until 1871, there was no public transport in Renneth, and the only way to get from place to place was to walk. That was to change when the railways came to town. This former line, which offers some good views to the east by the way, was a freight line that ran between Rufford Colliery and Blideth Colliery. However, Renneth had more than just one railway line. As you approach Mansfield Road, you come to two bridges immediately adjacent to one another. One crossed the Mansfield to Southall line, on which was Blideth and Renneth Station, which was in operation between 1877 and 1929. The other crossed Station Road, which is what we now know as Mansfield Road. The site of the station is now under Curzon Close, a little further north. On Westbrook Drive, this pub, the Lurcher, stands close to the route of the railway line. The station was replaced with a motor omnibus service, and speaking of buses, here's a modern bus stop, also on Westbrook Drive, served by the 27 and 27X. And here on Rugby Road, there's another bus stop where you can catch the 27. This one's a shelter as opposed to the little pole with the card on top of it. We're going to walk along Rugby Road for a while and then head into another housing estate, and it will take us eventually towards a church and a school. This next section is very residential. We're on a large housing estate here that was built in the 1950s between Station Road and Warsop Lane. It's also known as the Wimpy Estate. It's similar in many ways to the Geordie Estate, but you can tell it's just a bit older by looking at the houses. It has a few shops, like these on Preston Road. Renneth hasn't really seen any massive expansion in recent times. That said, there are pockets of infilling and this newish housing estate off Warsop Lane. Honestly, there's nothing very interesting about this area other than maybe this park. Really, as far as the route goes, I was just using this as a way to get to an old church. And here it is on Warsop Lane. Opened in the 1960s, this was a chapel of ease dedicated to St George, and it served both Renneth and Blideth. It closed in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. Still very much open though is the Archer, a large L-shaped open-plan pub which has live music every other weekend. Okay, so we've seen the church, which I mentioned. Now it's time for the school. I've seen plenty of people walking around this place this morning wearing their school uniform. This is where they're all heading for. This is the Joseph Whittaker School, and this is the next thing to talk about. Renneth Secondary School is named after Joseph Whittaker. He was a well-known naturalist who established a bird sanctuary right here in the village. For most of his life he lived at Renneth Lodge on Blideth Lane. Mansfield Museum houses his fine collection of stuffed birds. The school was opened in 1963. Until that time, Renneth only had primary schools, so secondary-aged children had to go elsewhere. The school is part of the East Midlands Educational Trust, which it joined in September 2016. It has its own sixth form too, and in November 2012, its brand new flagship sixth form centre opened at a cost of £1 million. Once past the school, we've got a couple of things left to see. One of them is the Renneth Primary Care Centre, which is a surgery and a pharmacy all rolled into one. And as Warsop Lane reaches its end, there's what I'm terming a small village green. If you get lost around this village, this should be your reference point. So pretty small as village greens go, but that sign behind us is quite handy. It tells you where pretty much everything is in Renneth. Petrol station, Python Hill School, Tippings Wood, the sports ground, the village hall, the two schools, post office, car park and Heathland School. They're all listed on this sign. One thing that's not listed on this sign though is our last landmark, but really it doesn't need to be because it's right there and it's the church. Renneth Church is dedicated to St Simon and St Jude, and it was built in 1939. It replaced a much older wooden church which had been erected in 1890. Its dedication is due to the fact that it was opened on the festival day of St Simon and St Jude, which a quick Google search will tell you is October 28th. In the grounds there's a war memorial, and it's quite an interesting one. It was placed here in 2003 and it honours those lost in World War II, 20 of them. However, it also honours another man from an unknown conflict, bringing its total names to 21. World War I's casualties are honoured inside the church. All that remains now is to walk back through the central junction to the start. Here's one last tale I'm sure many of you will remember. In 1975, the village centre hit the headlines. It was where the killer, Donald Nielsen, better known as the Black Panther, was apprehended by police outside the Junction fish and chip shop, aided by two men who were in the queue. And we're back to where we began, outside the post office. Now, all the way around, we've been talking, of course, about Rufford Colliery, one reason why Renneth is so big. Where was the colliery though? Well, it was to the north of the village, and that's going to form today's special section, and this will include something called the desert. Rufford Colliery was the second mine in the Mansfield area to be established by the Bolsover Colliery Company. Its first mine shafts were sunk in 1911. So why was it named Rufford Colliery and not Renneth? The answer is that for Rufford, the Bolsover Colliery Company worked with Lord Savile as opposed to the Duke of Portland. As such, Rufford was named after his Rufford estate. After over 80 years of service, Rufford Colliery closed in 1993. The pit wheel memorial we saw earlier stands at what used to be the main colliery entrance. Several men lost their lives here, including 13 in its worst disaster just 2 years after the pit opened. Now gone, Rufford Colliery has left behind some interesting landmarks. One of these is the desert, which has become quite popular for off-road biking. In fact, at one time, it was so popular that burger vans turned up to trade at it. It is, however, illegal, as the site remains private property. Time to leave Renneth behind and head to another mining village for the penultimate episode of Newark and Sherwood. Despite its massive output, Rufford Colliery was younger than one just a mile away down the road. Join me next week as we explore the strange connection between a Nottinghamshire village and a baby's crib. Laters all. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.